It started at gate 2 to be 30 minutes before boarding. A black woman in her 30s stood quietly in the first-class line. Navy coat buttoned, cream scarf tucked neatly around her neck. She wasn't talking, wasn't fidgeting, wasn't doing anything but waiting her turn. And somehow, that alone became the problem. The airline agent glanced at her, then leaned across the counter, her voice sharp and loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Ma'am, are you lost? This is the first-class line." The woman didn't respond with the sass or attitude. She just raised her eyebrows slightly and said, "I'm exactly where I need to be." But that wasn't enough. Not for the agent, not for the man 2 spots behind her who scoffed and whispered, "Typical." And definitely not for the employee who pressed a little button under the counter and flagged potential passenger disturbance without blinking. Within minutes, an airport police officer approached her. "Step aside, ma'am. We've had a report." "A report of what?" Standing waiting in line to calmly looking too confident while black. The officer didn't elaborate. He just gestured, hand hovering way too close to his belt. That's when a teenager nearby raised her phone and started recording. Her whisper barely audible. She didn't even do anything, but the camera caught everything. The way the woman stood her ground. The way the crowd stiffened. How some eyes narrowed while others looked away in silent guilt. One man muttered, "She hasn't said a word since she got here," but no one with authority was listening. The woman's calm never broke. She didn't shout, didn't raise her hands, didn't even look afraid. She simply asked the officer, "Can you explain what I'm being accused of?" The agent behind the counter chimed in before he could answer. She stared at me. Her posture was aggressive. It felt threatening. That word threatening cut through the air like a slur. It wasn't about what she did. It was about what they thought someone like her could do. And suddenly being tall, composed, and unbothered became a threat to security. People in line began to shift. A woman pulled her child closer. A man whispered something to his wife. And that's when the second officer arrived. 2 officers for a woman who had yet to move, yet to shout, yet to do anything but exist. The woman took a breath deep and steady. Her voice didn't waver. "You can call whoever you need to call," she said. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me exactly what I did wrong." But the truth was, she already knew the answer. And soon, so would everyone watching, because this woman wasn't just a passenger. She was someone the system never expected to stand in this line, and what came next would flip the entire script. Her name was Samantha Hall, but most people just called her Sam. She was 34 years old, born and raised in East Baltimore, a place that taught her how to move through the world with grit and grace. Her mom worked night shifts, cleaning schools. Her dad fixed up busted cars in a one-bay shop with a leaky roof. They didn't have much, but they gave her 2 things that never ran out: discipline and pride. Sam had always been fast. In high school, she ran track like her life depended on it. But after her cousin, barely 19, was killed during a police stop, Sam stopped running from things. She started running toward justice, and she never stopped up by 27. She was one of the youngest black women to complete the Federal Air Marshal Program. Tactical training, advanced firearms, psychological endurance. They threw everything at her, and she passed with numbers that raised eyebrows. She didn't chase glory. She worked in silence, always calm, always unnoticed until it mattered. On the day she was flagged at the gate, Sam had just finished a 3-month internal audit assignment with Homeland Security. Her task? Quietly review patterns of racial profiling at major U.S. airports. The numbers didn't lie black and brown. Passengers were being flagged at nearly triple the rate. Sometimes it was under the pretense of random selection. Sometimes it was unusual behavior. But time and time again, it came down to one thing: who they looked like, what they wore, how they stood. And Sam had seen it firsthand. A grandmother in her 70s pulled aside and patted down like a threat. A Muslim woman in tears as TSA agents made her remove her hijab in public. A Latino man forced to spell his last name 3 times, even though his boarding pass was already scanned. It was subtle, quiet, smothered under smiles and policy. But it was real. She had documented it all quietly, thoroughly by the book. But that day at Gate 2B, that wasn't part of the assignment. She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't undercover. She was off duty, headed home to see her mom, who had just been discharged from the hospital. She wore a plain navy blue coat, a soft cream scarf, jeans, no badge, no makeup, no attitude, just exhaustion, and the simple desire to get on a plane and breathe. But sometimes just standing in the wrong place while black is all it takes. A look, a posture, a silence that makes someone uncomfortable. That's what triggered the gate agent's concern. Not anything Sam did, just who she was. And she knew it the second the agent's eyes locked on hers. It wasn't surprise. It was suspicion. The agent didn't ask for ID, didn't verify the ticket. She pressed the alert button behind the desk before Sam said a word. That wasn't policy. That was prejudice. Sam stood still, her posture neutral, while two airport officers flanked her like she was a threat. One tried to keep it friendly, asking vague questions, throwing in soft phrases like, "just doing our job." The other one kept glancing at her hands like they might suddenly turn violent. But Sam didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't step back. She simply said, "Is standing in line now considered a security risk?" The silence that followed spoke volumes. The officer shifted his weight, one hand resting near his duty belt, eyes flicking from Sam to the gate, agent clearly hoping she'd just back down. But Sam didn't move. She didn't fold her arms or raise her voice. She just stood there completely still, composed, observant, and somehow that made them more nervous. Dodd and the gate agent, now flustered and growing louder, blurted out. She stared at me like she wanted to start something. Her whole stance, it was threatening. There it was again. That word threatening. A word that gets weaponized when there's no real violation to point to. A word that says more about fear than fact. Passengers nearby started to take notice. A young woman in a Stanford hoodie whispered to her friend, "She's not doing anything." The guy in line behind Sam White, early 40s, Bluetooth, still in his ear, shook his head and muttered, "This is ridiculous." But the officers didn't waver. They asked Sam to step aside again, this time with a little more force in their tone. Sam looked at them, not defiant but steady. "You haven't told me what law I've broken," she said. "You haven't told me why I'm being singled out. You haven't even asked to see my ticket." The officers didn't respond because they knew she was right. That's when a woman, mid-blonde, wearing business casual, stepped forward from the back of the line. "Excuse me," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've been standing here this whole time." That woman didn't say a word to anyone. She wasn't threatening. She was just standing in line. "What exactly is the issue?" There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. The officers didn't have an answer. The gate agent just glared at the woman and said, "We're handling it." But it was already too late. People had started filming. The phones were out. The murmurs were growing. The crowd wasn't hostile. They were skeptical. And when a crowd turned skeptical, the illusion of authority starts to crack. Then from the jet bridge, a flight attendant emerged. Latina, mid-30s, sharp eyes. She glanced at Sam and froze for half a beat. Sam didn't flinch. She knew that. Look. Recognition. The flight attendant didn't say Sam's name. She didn't need to. She simply walked over to the gate agent and said quietly, "You need to be careful. That woman is not who you think she is." The agent rolled her eyes. "I know what I saw." "No." The flight attendant said flatly, "You don't." And with that, she turned and walked back down the jet bridge. No badge, no reveal, no confrontation. Just the seed planted. And it was enough to shift the atmosphere. The officers exchanged a look. One pulled out a radio dot. Sam said nothing. She didn't need to. The narrative was already unraveling. She was still standing exactly where she'd been all along. The officer with the radio stepped away, speaking in low tones, but Sam could tell by the stiffness in his shoulders. It wasn't a routine call. He wasn't just checking ID or confirming boarding status. He was escalating. And she knew what that meant. This was the part where the situation could spiral. The part where non-compliant gets thrown around even when you've complied with everything. The part where being silent, calm and black becomes a danger all by itself. The second officer stayed close, not saying much. His eyes kept darting toward the cluster of passengers now watching like an audience. Cameras were up. A live stream was already running. Sam could hear someone whisper behind her, "She's going to go viral. This is messed up." But she stayed still. She didn't want viral. She wanted the gate agent, meanwhile, wasn't backing down. Emboldened by the silence of authority, she crossed her arms and said loudly, "You should have just gotten in the right line." Instead of trying to intimidate staff, the crowd reacted with a collective shift, shoulders tensing, heads turning. One guy near the wall muttered, "Wow, she's really doubling down." And then the woman in business casual spoke again. "She's in the right line, she has the ticket. I saw her check it." "You just assumed she didn't belong here," the gate agent shot back. "And who are you to make that call?" The woman didn't flinch. A person with eyes, a person with a conscience. The gate agent's cheeks flushed and she looked away. But the damage was done. Now the crowd wasn't just watching. They were choosing sides. And those sides weren't falling the way the airline had hoped. Then came the third voice. A teenage girl, maybe 16, near the end of the line. She hadn't said a word until now. But her voice was clear and brave as she asked, "Is she being arrested or something?" Because she didn't even move. "I've been filming the whole time." The words cut through the space like a bell. A teenager. A phone. A sentence that made the officers visibly uncomfortable. No one's under arrest. The officer finally said, "We're just trying to resolve a misunderstanding." Sam turned to him, calm as ever. "Then let's resolve it. Show me the policy that says standing quietly in line becomes a threat." He didn't answer. He couldn't. And in that moment something shifted. The officer lowered his hand from his belt. The crowd leaned in. The truth was clear. Even without anyone saying it directly, they'd picked the wrong woman. And she wasn't just standing her ground. She was revealing theirs. The officer who had stepped away returned. His tone quieter now. He leaned over to whisper something to the other officer too low for anyone to hear. Sam watched him carefully. His whole posture had shifted from authority to uncertainty. Whatever he'd just been told, it wasn't helping their case. And that's when Sam knew they were starting to figure it out. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. That wasn't her style. She just tilted her head slightly, waiting. The second officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, are you willing to step aside and speak with the airport security management just to clear things up?" Sam met his gaze. "No, I'm willing to speak to your TSA supervisor or a Homeland Security liaison. Not a gate agent with a grudge." He blinked. That was specific, too specific for a regular passenger. He glanced at the other officer, who nodded slowly. The whisper had turned into a realization. They'd pushed someone without knowing who they were pushing. And now it was too late to walk it back quietly. Then came another shift. A uniformed TSA supervisor arrived, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the scene. He was mid-50s, sharp, tired-looking. But when he spotted Sam, he froze. Not because she was a problem, but because he recognized her. "Agent Holt," he said softly, approaching. "Is everything all right here?" The air changed instantly. The gate agent's face went pale. The officer straightened up. "Sam didn't move, I was just waiting to board," she said plainly. "Apparently that's threatening now." The supervisor gave a tight nod and turned to the gate agent. "Step away from the desk. Please, right now," the gate agent sputtered. But Shay gave me a look. I said, "Step away." He repeated firmer this time. Passengers watched stunned as the woman backed off. One of them whispered, "She really was someone." But Sam wasn't interested in proving anything. She wasn't interested in vindication for the cameras. She looked at the TSA supervisor and said, "This has happened to more people than me. I've got the data in my report. This gate, 18 incidents in 6 weeks. Most of them never make it this far." He nodded again, slower this time. "I've seen the numbers. I just didn't realize they tried to flag you too. Sam adjusted her scarf and exhaled. They didn't try. They did. The supervisor turned back to the officers. This is no longer your scene. Stand down. And just like that, the power dynamic flipped. No badge flash. No scene, no threats, just truth. Protocol hand. A woman who knew the system better than anyone in that terminal. She didn't ask for an apology. She didn't need one. The silence around her was enough. Because now everyone watching knew she was the one person in that line who had every right to be there and every reason not to walk away. Sam didn't board right away. She stood to the side as the crowd slowly quieted, people turning back to their phones, their bags, their conversations. But something had changed. The tension had cracked open. And what came pouring out wasn't just relief. It was reflection. The same people who had looked at her with suspicion were now whispering to one another with unease, not about her, but about themselves, about what they had just witnessed, about how close they had come to letting it slide. The TSA supervisor walked with Sam a few feet away from the gate, out of earshot. "I didn't know you were flying today," he said. She nodded. "Off-duty visiting my mother, or at least I was trying to." "I'll file the incident report myself," he added. "You won't need to do a thing." But Sam just looked at him calm and direct. "Oh, I'll be filing something. Not just for me. For every passenger who's been flagged by that agent this month. I've got footage, witness statements, timestamps. You'll have it by Monday." The supervisor swallowed hard. Understood. Sam had no interest in revenge. She was far more dangerous than that. She was interested in facts, documentation, accountability, and she had built a career out of knowing exactly how to follow the rules in a system designed to pretend it has none. Back at the gate, the two officers had quietly stepped aside, now radioing in that the situation had been resolved. But what they didn't say, what no report would reflect, was that the situation had only been created in the first place by a cocktail of bias and pride. And it had only been resolved because their target knew exactly how to dismantle it without raising her voice, without flashing her badge, without even moving her feet. Then came the twist no one expected. As the boarding call was finally announced, a woman, mid-30s black dressed in business casual, approached Sam cautiously. "I saw what happened. I just want to say thank you for how you handled it. My teenage son was watching and it meant something." Sam gave her a small nod. "That's why I didn't walk away." But the woman continued quietly. "I work for the Department of Transportation, and this isn't the first complaint we've heard about this gate team. If you file that report, it won't be buried." That was the moment Sam realized she wasn't alone. People were paying attention. People who worked inside the system. People who were tired, too. And maybe this wasn't just going to be another viral video with no follow-through. She boarded the plane last, not because she was afraid, because she was deliberate. As she passed the gate agent's desk, she paused just slightly, long enough for the woman to meet her eyes. No anger, no sarcasm, just truth. Sam leaned in and said, "Being wrong doesn't make you a bad person, but refusing to learn from it, that's a choice." And with that, she stepped onto the jet bridge. By the time Sam took her seat through a window, cabin was nearly full. A few passengers glanced up as she passed. One gave her a nod of quiet respect. Another, the teenage girl who'd recorded everything, slipped her a note, folded into a napkin. Sam opened it just before takeoff. It said, "I want to be like you when I grow up. I thought I was powerless, but you proved we're not. No name, just that." And it was enough. As the plane began to taxi, Sam stared out the window, reflecting on what had just unfolded. Not just the incident, but the bigger truth behind it. What had happened to her wasn't rare. It was painfully common. The only difference was, this time, the wrong woman had been singled out. The wrong person for them because she was trained for this. Not to fight, but to expose. Not to shout, but to document. Not to perform, but to act with intention. She had walked through that terminal as a black woman first, a citizen second, and a federal officer last. And yet, despite her titles, It was her presence that had threatened people the most. Back at the airport, the report Sam promised was already taking shape. She had dates, time stops, witnesses, the flight attendant, who subtly recognized her. She'd followed up with a secure email before the plane even reached cruising altitude. The woman from the Department of Transportation. She'd requested a confidential call by end of week. And the video, it was already on its way to going viral. But Sam didn't share it. The teenager did. By the time Sam landed, 3 news outlets had already reached out for comment. She declined. This wasn't about headlines. It was about patterns. And she had the data to prove it. But there was one last move she made. A quiet one. She submitted a formal internal review request. Not for disciplinary action, but for retraining. She didn't want the gate agent fired. She wanted her educated, corrected, held to the same standard the system claimed to uphold. Because Sam believed in justice, not punishment. And justice, she knew, meant change. That perhaps was the real twist. That the most powerful person in that airport wasn't the loudest or the most armed. She wasn't even on the job. She was just paying attention. And because she was, everything changed for that gate agent, for the officers, and for every traveler who might look like her, speak like her, or dare to stand where someone thought they didn't belong. The uniform might have been off, but the badge never left her. And it didn't need to be shown to shift the power. It just needed to exist. 3 days after the flight, Samantha Hall sat on the porch of her mother's home, sipping coffee from a chipped blue mug she'd used since childhood. The sun had barely risen and the world was quiet, something she hadn't experienced much lately. Her phone buzzed beside her. More messages, more articles. The video had hit over 3 million views. Comment sections were filling up with everything from outrage to admiration to confessions from people who'd witnessed similar moments but never spoke up. But Sam wasn't checking the numbers. She was reading the messages that mattered. The ones from young women saying, "I didn't know someone like you existed." And from tired mothers who said, "You made me feel less invisible." And that teenage girl from the gate. She'd found Sam's professional contact through the DOJ Public Records page. Sent a simple email, no emoji, no fanfare, just asterisk. "Thank you for not walking away. I used to think staying quiet kept me safe. I don't think that anymore." That one made Sam sit in silence for a long while, because the truth is she had almost walked away. Not out of fear, out of fatigue. You get tired of proving your humanity to people who refuse to see it. You get tired of being the calm one, the rational one, the patient one. But in that moment at the gate, surrounded by cameras and silence and bias and attention, Sam had made a choice. Not to walk away quietly, not to fight loudly, but to stand with purpose. And that somehow had echoed louder than anything else. She didn't win a lawsuit. There was no dramatic courtroom moment. The agent wasn't marched out in handcuffs. But that wasn't the victory Sam wanted. The real win was what happened quietly. The airport management reviewed the profiling logs. The gate agent was removed from front-facing duty and required to attend implicit bias training. More importantly, the TSA revised its internal reporting threshold for passenger demeanor complaints. That section, it would now require verification, not just personal discomfort, small changes, but real ones. And Sam, she was already preparing for her next assignment. Different airport, different city, same mission. Because being a Fedra, Marshal wasn't about the badge or the uniform. It was about showing up in places where justice usually goes unnoticed, in making it visible. As the sun rose higher, Sam looked out over the quiet street and took a slow breath. She thought about how many people would never know her name, but might still feel the ripple of what she'd done. Not because she shouted, not because she resisted, but because she stood, and in standing, she reminded everyone watching in the system itself that dignity is not optional, that silence is not consent, and that the most dangerous kind of strength is the kind that doesn't need to be proven. It just needs to be present.